Hello and welcome to Pro-Life, Pro-Liberty. I wanted to do a quick video to talk about how I'm preserving food or storing food for potential disaster, whatever that may look like. So I've talked a lot on my blog and in my videos and in my live streams about being prepared for disaster, and especially being prepared for whatever it is that 2020 throws at us next. So we've already had a crazy year. There's already been all kinds of catastrophes and disasters, some on a smaller scale and some on a larger scale. So some of you may have already experienced a situation in which you or personally had a disaster or a SHTF kind of scenario because you lost your job. Maybe you were evicted from your home. Like, there were a lot of those kinds of scenarios that happened this year for individual families. You know, it wasn't a societal collapse, but it was a personal disaster that you experienced. And so those, I definitely want to like take those into account and say, this, you may not be waiting for the big collapse. You may be living in that scenario right now, or you may find yourself in that scenario personally when you haven't necessarily, we haven't necessarily lost all of society, but you have lost your network and your infrastructure that keeps your family going. So what I wanted to do was talk about how I'm storing food for the event of a disaster scenario, especially now that we are getting toward the election. My theory, okay, my prediction, my hypothesis, I could be wrong. I hope I am. But this is what seems to me to be the most likely scenario given everything that's happened so far this year and everything that's kind of being hyped up in the media. My anticipated scenario is that on election night, where the election night coverage is not going to look like what it normally does. Normally we sit around the TV on election night and we watch the results come in, and the map pops up red and blue, and you know, some states take longer to call than others. Maybe there's a state or two that's in the air and we don't quite have the clear winner right away, but usually by the end of the night, or by the time we hit morning, usually there is a winner. And in the morning, if you went to bed and you didn't stay up for the prolonged coverage overnight, you wake up in the morning and you find out who won, right? And in the morning, you know who the next president is going to be, or if it's going to be the same president, who won your House and Senate races, that sort of thing. That's not what we're going to see on election night. Now, I don't know what the cable news stations are planning for their coverage, because normally you have the big map and you have the call this state and call that state. The concern with this year, because of COVID and because of the push for mail-in ballots. So we've always had absentee ballots. Absentee ballots, you apply for a ballot because you have an extenuating circumstance that prevents you from physically going to the polls. And those have always been limited to those extenuating circumstances. So those can include a disability that prevents you from leaving your home or makes it difficult for you to leave your home. For elderly people, often do it this way. You're out of the state during the entire election season, essentially. So states do early voting and things like that. And, you know, you're essentially saying, I'm not going to be in state for that entire period of time. Other situations involve, you know, if you're in the military, again, you're out of state. You're in college, again, out of state. So those are reasons you might be out of state for that entire period of time. I voted absentee twice while I was in college, two separate elections, because of that very reason. I was in college out of state. I lived in Texas, but I was going to college in California. And so I voted absentee. I applied for an absentee ballot. I received one in my name. I filled it out, signed it, followed all the steps, and I mailed it in, right? Now, I also know that under normal years, absentee ballots only get counted if it's super close, and that those absentee ballots could make the difference. The issue with the mail-in ballots is that we're going to have so many of them that it's going to be difficult for election officials and for cable news to know what races to call, or what to call and when to call it, because the mail-in ballots are not going to all be counted by election night. They're not, because some states actually don't allow you to start counting until election day. And some states allow the ballot to be postmarked on election day, which means it may not arrive at the county office or wherever it goes for a number of days or weeks, depending on if the Postal Service is overwhelmed, which it likely will be because of the influx of mail-in ballots, especially right around that time, especially for those states where you postmark it on that day and there's going to be people who wait till that day. So what we're going to have is we're going to have a portion of ballots that are in on election day, and those are going to be the in-person votes. So those people that vote in person, we're going to have that data immediately. And that data is going to be overwhelmingly pro-Trump. And I say this not as a Trump supporter. Y'all know, if you follow my blog, you'll know I'm voting George Jorgensen. Okay? But as a Trump supporter, I'm saying overwhelmingly Trump voters are planning to vote in person. You see this if you know any Trump supporters, or if you yourself are a Trump supporter. Trump supporters are voting in person. Biden supporters, some are voting in person. A lot of Biden supporters are going to vote by mail, either because they're concerned about COVID, or in some cases, what I'm seeing is people wanting to vote by mail just to prove that voting by mail works. Like there's kind of now this, it's been politicized, that voting by mail is now a Democratic thing. If you're a liberal, if you're on the left, if you're a Democrat, there's kind of this like, well, yeah, we have to prove that we can vote by mail because it's under attack, because Trump's attacking the vote by mail system in the post office and whatever. So I think there's a kind of a push on that side too. So what I'm saying is the majority of Biden voters, or the majority of mail-in votes are going to be for Biden. The majority of in-person votes are going to be for Trump. So on election night, when we have the in-person votes, it's going to look like a Trump landslide. But we won't be able to call anything. So what we're going to see is a possible Trump landslide, but no result called yet, and we don't know how long we're going to be counting mail-in ballots. So we're going to see riots, we're going to see protests, and it's going to be weeks before a winner can be declared, depending on the number of people that vote by mail. And it may be up to the Supreme Court to decide when to stop counting. So there's going to be a prolonged period of time where we do not know who the next president is going to be, or if Trump's going to stay in office. And there's going to be a lot of fear and anger. And there's going to be rioting. And with fear and anger and rioting is going to come panic from people who maybe aren't out on the streets, but they don't know what's going to happen. And they've waited until that moment where there's panic and there's fear to try and figure out what they're going to do to feed their family, to protect their family. So you're already seeing runs on guns and ammo. Gun stores cannot keep ammunition in stock. Certain calibers of ammunition, you just cannot keep it in stock. The local Academy Sports place near where I live, they get deliveries. I forget which day. It's some day of the week that they get their deliveries of ammo, and literally it's a Black Friday style line out in front of the store on that day when they open and when they have that delivery in. And it's people lining up to buy their ammo. It's there's ammo limits, like how many boxes you can buy per person of certain types of ammo. And I heard a story recently that there was a man who had come in, bought his ammo, his limit, went out to the parking lot, changed his shirt and his mask, because you have to wear a mask to go in the store. So he changed his shirt and his mask and came back in to buy more ammo. And apparently it worked like once or twice, and then the employees caught on that this was happening. But they were able to kind of call him out on it. But like, that's where we're at right now with ammo. We're going to see it with food, especially as the election gets closer, or we're going to see it after election night when people realize just how chaotic this is going to be. So all of that is to say that this is the time to stock up on food before we get to that point. October is the time, if you haven't already. Now, hopefully you've been listening to what I've been saying and you stocked up on food weeks ago. But some of y'all were asking me through my blog and through my videos, what am I doing to stock up on food? What am I personally doing? So I've kind of given you recommendations. I've said at the bare minimum, you should have 2 weeks of food. Now, I'd love for people to have more than that. It's ideally you should have as much food as you can possibly store. Your circumstances may vary. Now, before I show you what my preps are, and I'm not showing you all my preps, no prepper should ever show all their preps or everything that they're doing. You never want to give everything away because you don't want to become a target in the event of a disaster. You don't want people to come looking for you and your preps. You don't want your neighbor to be like, oh, I think they've got, but I'm going to show you at least some of what I've got and kind of give you some ideas of what to do. So before I do that, I need to give you a little bit of background on my particular situation. Again, without giving too much detail, I need to give you at least an overview. So everybody's situation is different. What my situation is that I live in the city, in an apartment, okay? I do not have land. I do not have a basement or a cellar to store lots of food. I have a tiny kitchen and a tiny pantry. Actually, technically, I don't have a pantry. It's a recessed part of the wall with shelves where I put shelves in. It's not actually a pantry. So I do not have a lot of food storage space in my current living situation. Now, ideally, I'd love to get into a different living situation, but that's not going on right now. So the way my situation is at this time, the plan, I have a bug out plan. Okay, so ideally you don't want to bug out unless that's your only option. For me, that's going to be my only option. Now I'm hoping that I do not have to bug out on foot, because if I do, that's going to be a very difficult situation. I'm hoping that I can bug out by car, and most likely that will be the case. As it is, I am planning to preemptively at least be out of the city, or out of the main part of the city on election night, just in case, because I do have concerns about rioting, especially including in my area of town. So there are certain things I'm going to bring with me when that happens, just in case I'm not able to come back to my apartment for some time or ever, potentially. So there is going to be some preparation in that regard. But so what I'm focused on here is not so much preparation to ride out the entirety of the disaster, but preparation to get through the initial chaos and get me to my bug out location. And I think I've mentioned this in videos before, but my bug out plan, there are, a lot of preppers will form kind of coalitions or groups with other preppers in their area, or friends or family members that have a prepper mindset. They don't necessarily have to be full-blown preppers. And so you kind of form a group and you agree to meet up at a given location, especially if a member in your group does have some space and some land where you can meet up. So that's more or less the situation that I'm in. So I will be going and meeting up with others, in that situation. So don't come looking for, even if you figure out where I live, don't come looking for my preps here, because they won't be here. They'll be gone in the event of a true disaster. But so I want to show you, with all of that in mind, I want to show you a couple of things that I have. So the first thing that I have, and let's see if I can adjust my camera to show you this. So this is Augustan Farms. I got this off of Amazon. This is not top of the line. I'm trying to I have budget as well. This is not top of the line, but it is pretty good. Wise Company, Mountain House, those are all very good. Augustan Farms, they're up there, but they're not the top of the line if you're willing to splurge, if you've got the money to burn, especially since our currency may be worthless by the end of next year anyway, according to Business Insider. There's a Business Insider article about that, but if you're ready to burn the money because you want to be prepared, you can go for some higher quality stuff, but this is still pretty good. And this says a 30-day supply. Now, they calculate the 30-day supply based on I believe it's a 2,000 calorie day intake for adults. Now, that's always been that kind of 2,000 calories a day. I and my husband do not need 2,000 calories a day. We can survive on less. Unless we're on foot. Now, if we're on foot, it might be a different scenario, and we're also not bringing this if we're on foot, so that's, again, a different scenario. And I'll go through that as well, what the on foot versus the by car plan is. But this is you add water to this, you can cook them, you can add hot water. I believe this is one of the ones also where you can add cold water, it just won't taste as good. And I'll talk about water as well, because I know some people are asking me about storing water. And again, given my specific situation where I am not staying put here, I am moving somewhere else in that disaster scenario, which I know is not ideal. Ideally, you want to be at a place where you can bug in. I'm just not in that situation. So I have this bucket, and it says 30 days. Honestly, based on their calorie counts, it could be 30 days for both me and my husband. This is supposed to be 30 days for one person, especially since I will be supplementing this with other foods. I will not be just eating out of this. This is a part of my food plan, especially because, again, I'll be bugging out to a place where there will be other food sources, but not necessarily super consistent food sources. So this will be a when there's not, if the food is inconsistent, especially if there's like a lot of, we're like hunting or we're growing things. And this is kind of to tide us over until those other systems are in place. So this is a temporary measure. Ideally, if you were going to live off of these, you would want one of these per person in your household to start with. So if you got 4 people in your household, 5 people in your household, you need one of these per person to get started. If you're bucking in, right? If you're not going to a place where there is food and there are supplies. Again, one of these per person, because this is 30 days. And there's actually inside this bucket, there's a little kind of food plan, meal plan sheet that has what you could eat. It's a kind of an example meal plan based on what's in here, what you could eat each day for 30 days, and to kind of make sure that you're making it last. And again, that's assuming that you're eating that kind of higher calorie count per day. So you can always eat less and make it last longer. And there's actually a 30-day and a 45-day plan in this bucket. So if you are trying to stretch it out, so you could, especially if you don't necessarily need 2,000 calories per day, or if you have kids, because they don't necessarily need, depending on their age and everything, they may not need as many calories per day. You might buy one of these per person and make it last 45 days, which is better. So that's part 1. Oof, and it is heavy, which is why if you are on foot, you are not taking this with you. So, if you have to leave on foot, that's not happening. Another thing that I have, and I don't have a lot of these, but this is just, again, if you need to store up some food in your home and you don't want to just rely on a freeze-dried food bucket like that. Just, canned food. And I got this large chili can, right? A couple of things about why I bought this particular can. First of all, it was cheap. And this is a backup food source. This is not a first thing that I'm going to, because it's not the most healthy, nutritious. Okay, this is the full of preservatives and artificial crap. Okay, so this is not, again, your first choice. This is you're desperate. You are desperate and you need to eat something. I got this large can. It's like 5 servings of chili. So this would not just be, this would be, and you're like, well, wait a second, you open that can and you cook that up and now it's going to go bad. So again, this would be something that I take with me. This goes, this and other stuff like this that I have is going to go with me to my bug out location to share with my bug out partners, my bug out group here. Okay, the people that I'm meeting up with. Again, in the event of the scenario, I would be sharing it with them. You'd be cooking it up for a meal, and that might just be because whatever day that you need to have some chili because it's cold or it's whatever. So that is part of it. And then I've gotten into canning. So this is, and it's kind of hard to see. These are canned tomatoes, okay? And if you can see, that's kind of like white on the outside. It's calcium or some kind of mineral deposit on the outside of the jar. It doesn't harm anything in the jar. The recipe that I followed said, put some vinegar in your boiling water in your canner so that you don't get these deposits. I'm like, nah, it'll be fine. Yeah, I got the deposits. So next time. But it doesn't hurt the can. Got a good seal. Seal is good. Okay, the lid is flat. It's sealed. Canned this. I don't know if you can see. I don't want to tip it too much. Canned this on the 5th of September, and looks just fine. Looks just as good as the day I canned it. And it's sitting in my cupboard, and this is key. This does not need to be refrigerated. This sits in my cupboard, right? With a few other cans of this, some cans of zucchini that has been pickled zucchini, which I'm actually excited to try that out. Again, on September 5th, I pickled some zucchini, and it takes 4 to 6 weeks before the flavor is full flavor. So if you gotta wait 4 to 6 weeks for full potency. Princess Bride quote, but so I'm letting it sit for at least 8 weeks, because what I started on September 5th, or about 8 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks. My birthday is coming up, and late at the end, toward the end of this month, and I will be popping open one of those cans to try my pickles for my birthday. It's gonna be a birthday treat for myself. So looking forward. I'll let you know how that goes. Once after I have my birthday, I will let you know how it was. But so canning and pickling and fermenting are all also great ways to store food, especially if you have space. Now I have limited space. I cleared out a cupboard, right, for some canned food. So it's not enough. It's not enough to live off of, but it's a few things. And this canned food here, both the chili and the tomatoes, are also I'm also kind of thinking about those in the event that there's a temporary disaster and I am stuck in the apartment for a period of time and I'm not necessarily full on bug out, or I'm kind of waiting it out to see how things go. So those are kind of that idea. Another thing, this is more for the on-foot bug out. This is the on-foot bug out scenario. So I got these survival tabs, and so these are not going to give you your full calorie intake for the day, but what they are going to do, they're going to give you a little bit of sugar to kind of keep it going, some carbohydrates. They're going to give you some protein, not too much, but some protein, and they're going to give you a bunch of vitamins and minerals. So, some zinc and some different, B12 and vitamin A and all these kinds of, and calcium. They're going to give you some vitamins and minerals. And what these are for is a short term. This is not something that you live off of long term. This is short term to get you to your destination. So this is if I have to bug out on foot and I can't take all the big stuff with me. And really the only situation where I see myself bugging out on foot is an EMP, which I've talked about in previous videos, where all the cars don't work. So that's the only situation in which I see myself bugging out on foot. But in that event, or even just for whatever reason, car breaks down kind of thing on the way to the bug out location, whatever, I've got these. And so I carry these around in my bug out bag. I have a couple in my husband's bug out bag. And that's what this one's for my husband's bug out bag. And it comes in different flavors. What is this one? I forget what flavor this is. Does it say? It should say on it. But anyway, they come in different flavors. I forget which one. Oh, strawberry. Here we go. Strawberry. Okay, this is the strawberry one. There's chocolate, vanilla, all that. But these are a pretty good deal. And now here's the thing. So like I said, you can't live off of them, although I have heard some stories of people using this as a diet plan. I don't know how good of a diet plan it is, because the idea is that you eat, there's, serving size is 12 tabs, all right, and you eat like one an hour. So you're eating these throughout the day. You're not just eating a whole bunch at once. You're essentially eating them as you go. So it says 1 tablet every hour up to 12 hours daily. And it says there's nothing unsafe about taking more than one. It's just going to change your rations. So the idea is that as you're hiking, so you're hiking and every hour you take a tab and it kind of keeps you going, gives you that extra burst of energy, an extra burst of vitamins and minerals to keep you going. Now, all of this, again, to qualify all of this, this is not your ideal diet, right? So ideally you're eating fresh, natural foods, local grown, fresh whole food. You're not eating all this processed stuff. This is emergency food. This is not your normal diet. This is not your daily diet. This is your emergency situation. You need to have this on hand because you can't go to the farmer's market if there's rioting and looting. There's not going to be a farmer's market. I'm sorry. And so again, if you're in the position to homestead, to grow your own food, to provide for your family on your own land, do it. Right? I wish I was in that position. I wish I could homestead. Now I'm trying to grow food in my community garden plot, so I'm trying to grow more of my own food, but if you're in a position to do so, please do so, because that's better than anything I'm showing you today. Like, all of this is temporary stuff. Now, the only exception maybe is the canned food. So the stuff that I'm canning does not have a whole lot of preservative. It doesn't have preservatives in it besides salt and vinegar. Like, it's got a little bit of apple cider vinegar. I don't even think I put salt in this. I think this is just apple cider vinegar and tomatoes, if I remember correctly. So, because the apple cider vinegar raises the acidity just a little bit. The tomatoes are pretty acidic, but they're not acidic enough to be water bath canned on their own. So you add a little bit of apple cider vinegar, and I water bath can these. I don't pressure can. I don't have a pressure canner. I haven't bought one. They're expensive. Water bath can. I got a big stock pot. Got a canning rack that goes in the bottom of it, so these don't sit right on the bottom because they would break. You put them in that water. It's at a full rolling boil for however long the recipe says. In this case, these were like, I forget, these were like 80 minutes. This is a long one. The pickles were only like 10 minutes. So depending on your recipe. But this, if you're worried about healthy food and you want healthy, homegrown, wholesome food for your emergency stockpile, I would recommend going this route, especially if you have the space. Because this does take up more space than, say, this bucket. This bucket is very compact because it's freeze-dried. This is going to take up more space, but if you have the space, I would go with something like this. And you can can all kinds of things. Now, quick side note about canning. You will read online about canning and about how almost everything needs to be pressure canned, and that's what they'll tell you, with the exception of some preserves and things like tomatoes, okay, and pickles. And this is the funny thing. So I was doing all this research on canning, and I was kind of freaking myself out. I'm like, I'm gonna have to get a pressure canner because it says all these things. You have to pressure can them. But then I reread the guidelines, and it says or pickles, and I'm like, well, wait a second, what are pickles? They don't just mean pickled cucumbers, right? Like we think of pickles as pickled cucumbers. Pickles means anything that you pickle. You can pickle literally almost anything. You can pickle meat. They do pickle meat, right? It is, and salt brine, salt pork, stuff like that is, a little bit different, but you can pickle literally anything. Now, the taste is going to be different. You're going to have to like that vinegar taste, but if you like that vinegary, sour, acidic taste, you can pickle a lot of things. Now, again, there's limitations, and if you're eating pickled food every single day, that's a lot of acidity, and that may not sit well with your digestive system, so you want to balance it out, and you always want to rotate things out. But as far as being able to can things, you can can, in a water bath, literally almost anything, as long as you are ensuring the acidity level is high enough. So whether it's adding a little bit of acidity to your tomatoes, or whether it's pickling some of your other vegetables, you can water bath can it. Now, pressure canner, benefits of a pressure canner is that you can other things that you don't want to pickle. Fermenting is also an option, but fermenting you have to have cold storage or relatively cooler storage than, just your room temperature. So that's best if you have a cellar, because right now you've got a fridge. You may not have a fridge if the power goes out. I'm hearing rumors of possible attacks on the power grid, that sort of thing. So you want to be prepared in case the power goes out and the stuff in your fridge goes bad. So if you're going to ferment, you've got to make sure you have a place that is cool enough in your home without electricity. And hopefully, as we get into November, that's going to be easier for a lot of people because it's going to get colder. So that at least for October, November, December, that may be relatively easy. So if you're looking for healthy, canning things is probably your best bet, because you want to be able to store it long term. You don't want to be stuck with, you got all this fresh food in your fridge, all this fresh, local grown, picked the same day food, and then the power goes out and you have to eat all that food before it goes bad, and then you're out of food because you can't go get more. So if you're the kind of person who's like buying food all the time because you want it super fresh, you need to be thinking about what happens when you can't do that, and have some backup options. So again, this is not your daily diet. This is not your normal diet. Now, some of y'all asked about water, and I do have a little bit of water storage, but honestly, again, given my specific situation, storing water in that sense is not practical. I have limited space. If I've got limited space, I would rather store food in that space. Yes, you need water, but there's other ways. It's easier to get water than it is to get food. Like, we'll just go with that. Water is more plentiful. It's easier to source in the wild, but what you need, if you're sourcing water from a river, from a lake, even from rainfall, you need a way to purify it and filter it. So boiling water will purify it it will kill off bacteria and stuff that you don't need. Now, there's, again, back and forth about how important that is. Right now, especially living in Texas, I would recommend that you boil the water. In certain parts of Texas, we have an issue right now with brain-eating amoebas, because it's 2020 and we have to have brain-eating amoebas. So, because that's where we're at. So we have an issue with brain-eating amoebas. So I would definitely want to boil water for that reason. But then, even after you boil it, it's still like, you know, there's still stuff in it. There's microplastics, there's, you know, like little tiny bits of plastic, there's sediment, there's whatever else. And actually, a good filter will actually get some bacteria and things like that out too. And now I need to double check if it will get rid of brain-eating amoebas, because that would be good to know, because I'd like to not have to boil the water if that were the case. But what I've got for this is one of these, and I opened the package and put it in a Ziploc bag just for easier storage. But what you have is this Sawyer. Now there's also Life Straw, there's other brands, but this is a Sawyer mini water filter. Now I don't get any product, this is not product placement, I don't get any like kickbacks for this, and I don't have any affiliate links anymore. I used to have an affiliate account and Amazon was like, you're not getting enough clicks on it, because I was hardly using it. So I don't get that anymore. But this is a Sawyer mini water filter. And essentially, you pop open this cap, and this is your straw, and this can go directly in the water and you can drink. Or the other option, which makes a little bit more sense, especially if you're going to be on the go, is this, and it's a rubber band, and it goes, take that off. And so you have this pouch, you have this water bottle. So what you do is you fill up this water bottle at your river, at your lake, wherever you found your water source. You fill it up in here, and then you're gonna screw this on. Okay, I'm not gonna actually screw it on, but let me put this down. Okay, I'll actually screw it on just to show you. So, and you have to get it lined up, right? You have to be paying attention to what you're doing. Okay, there we go. So you screw that on, and now you have this thing. So you've got your bag filled with water, you've got your straw, you take the cap off, and you can drink. And you've got this bag of water that you filled up from a river, like, you know. And so again, you don't necessarily have to boil it. You can kind of, but it is supposed to filter out, see if it says on the bag, it doesn't say on the bag. It's supposed to filter out bacteria. What it said was it cannot filter out viruses, which is funny because there's a virus. But, so this will not protect you from COVID. This will not protect you from COVID, but it will protect you from bacteria. Now the question is, brain-eating amoebas, I'll have to check on that. But this is my water plan. Now, again, store some water. Don't just rely on the filter, but the filter is good in that situation where you cannot carry a bunch of water with you. Because if you were bugging out on foot or even by car, you don't want to be loading all this water in your car if you have to bug out quickly. You want to be able to grab a couple of things, you know, your bug out bag, in this case, my tub of food, right? Ideally, you want to pack up and get out to the car in one trip. So if that means you've got your bug out bag, you've got your self-defense methods, whatever those may be, and you've got your tub of food, right? That's a trip. Like, that's a trip to the car. And if each person in your family has a tub of food, or, you know, maybe Maybe you've got to figure something out if you've got little kids who can't carry the big tub of food by themselves. But essentially, you know, you're trying to get to the car in one trip because you're trying to get out as quickly as you can. If you are making trips back and forth from your home to the car, loading up, that's going to draw attention from your neighbors. And in a crisis situation, there may be some people who choose to take advantage of that and catch you off guard because you're flustered and loading all this stuff up. So you want to keep it simple if you're bugging out. Now, if you're bugging in and you have the space, store plenty of water. But I'm talking to people who are bugging out like I am. So, so that's kind of the whole thing. And, you know, really, it really depends on your situation. So just to kind of wrap up this video, I want to talk about the pros and cons of bugging in versus bugging out and what you should be doing in your situation. So, and I kind of already said this, but I want to just be clear on it. Because there's going to be people probably in the comments, I know among the prepper community, this is a hotly debated topic. Do you bug in? Do you bug out? It really depends on the situation. You'll see preppers that go all the way one way, all the way the other. My thing is it's never that cut and dry. Like, everybody should do this, everybody should do that. Everybody's situation is different. Now, for some people, bugging out means going out to the woods and setting up a survival camp and just completely going off grid with nothing, with the backpack on your back. And I used to think that way. And I'm still prepared to do that. Like, I have the tools and I've been doing the research and I have the knowledge and the tools to potentially go out into the woods. Now, how successful would I be doing that? Debatable. Probably not very. Because I'm not already spending, you know, if you're already a survivalist who already spends, you know, weekends out in the woods, you know, living off the land, that might be different. But for me, and for my husband, like, I know we probably would not do that well. That would be a last resort. But you don't want to not have that last resort. So again, if your idea of bugging out is going out into the woods, maybe just make that plan, you know, F, right? That's like plan F. Put a couple of plans in front of that are a little more practical for you and your situation. Again, unless you're an outdoorsman who spends weekends out living off the land, you know. So, but to me, bugging out simply means you need to leave where you are. So you could bug out of your office. If you work in an office building and something crazy happens, you could have to bug out of your office. You could have to pick up and leave in the middle of the day. Think about a fire drill, right? So in a fire drill, they always talk about don't take anything with you. It's not because they don't want you to have your stuff. It's because they don't want you to spend time gathering all your belongings. At the end of the day, you have to pack up all your stuff. And that a lot of times takes time because you kind of spread yourself out during the day, right? So in a fire drill, they tell you don't take anything with you because they don't want you to spend time packing up your belongings. If you have all your stuff in a way that you can pick up a backpack and go out the door, and that takes no more time than that, you can take your backpack. Like, I always take my purse or my backpack if I have a fire drill at work. I always take my bag, whatever that bag may be, because it has essential things in it, things I don't want to leave behind. Even in a drill situation, I don't want to leave those. I don't want to be separated from those for any length of time. So having a bug out bag that has essentials in it, where again, if an emergency happens, the zombie apocalypse strikes, right? And one of your office mates is patient zero, right? One of your coworkers suddenly turns zombie in the middle of the day and starts biting people. Again, not, you know, fictional scenario, but, you know, thinking about the urgency of that situation. What are some urgent situations, right? Terrorist attacks. Like, think about an explosion happens in your building or the building next to yours, and again, you have to evacuate quickly. You do not want to be scrambling around to find all your stuff. So there's lots of situations where you need to bug out. The idea behind bugging out is being able to pick up and leave at a moment's notice when the place that you're in is no longer safe. So even if you have a bug in plan, because you live in a scenario where you can bug in, you should also have a bug out plan, because there could come a time where your home, your bug in location, becomes unsafe. And then you need to pick up and leave, and you need to not be spending hours packing up the car because you may not have that much time. So that's the bug in, bug out idea. Generally speaking, if you live in an urban area, and especially if you live in an apartment, you're probably going to need to bug out. Urban areas, especially in the middle of town, downtown especially, are going to become unsafe. In many cases, they already are. Some of you, if you live in an urban area, downtown, middle of town, you've probably already seen your city undergo rioting and looting and burning to some level, more or less, depending on where you live. And we're not even at election day yet. So thinking about that, if you live in that urban area, you need to be making your bug out plan. Now that could be you've got family that lives out in the Midwest, and if that's the case, you may want to start making those plans sooner rather than later, especially if you're working remotely right now. If you're working from home, why can't you work, if grandma who lives on the farm, or aunt, Edith, who lives on a farm or lives in a rural area out in Nebraska, if she's got internet, which she probably does, why not go stay with her? Like, ask her if you can stay with her. Well, she may appreciate it. She may appreciate it, especially if she lives alone. You got that family member that lives alone that always wants you to come visit. This may be the time to go figure that out. But if you are not in that situation, you do not have a place to go stay, it is worth reaching out to local prepper communities. There's actually an interesting website that I've been looking at called Freedom Cells, and I will probably post the link in the description of this video. And I have not tried it out yet. It's up to you, buyer beware, use at your own risk. But because I haven't really vetted it fully, but I just kind of stumbled across it and it's interesting. And it's essentially the idea of locating other preppers and also just generally freedom-loving, liberty-loving people in your area who want to establish, trade and support networks and things like that outside of the typical system, like outside of government, outside of the typical infrastructure. So, free trade, free support, back and forth, mutual assistance, mutual aid, mutual defense kind of situations, which is what I've been talking about. I've been talking about setting up a mutual aid or a mutual defense community or group. And this looks to be a way to establish that if you don't know anyone in your area who's of that mindset. So if you're in a situation where you live in the middle of the city and you don't know any other preppers who have land or whatever, this may be worth looking into. I'll put the link in the description. If you live in the suburbs, you may be able to bug in, but you need to, number one, be willing to defend your home. You are going to have to defend your home from looters, because once they're done with the downtown and they're done with the city, they're going to spread out into the suburbs, right? Whoever the rioters are, the opportunistic looters, they're going to spread out. They're eventually going to get to the suburbs. They're going to get to your neighborhood. They're going to get to your street. And you do not want to lose everything you've prepared to somebody who came in and took it from you. So ideally, if you're going to bug in the suburbs, and really if you're going to bug in anywhere, you need to be able to defend yourself. You need to be armed, and you need to be trained and prepared to use those firearms, and be willing to defend your property and your family to the extent of potentially killing somebody, right? So, I mean, I'm pro-life, pro-liberty, y'all don't want to hear about this, but self-defense is a basic right, is an inherent right. We have the right to defend ourselves. And it is important that you be prepared to defend your family, to defend your family's life, right? The lives of your children, the life of your spouse, in that scenario, because if in a true collapse, disaster, civil unrest, civil war, I'm hearing some talk about scenario, if looters and opportunistic thieves and thugs break into your home and take your stuff or force you to flee, they may have just killed your family if you're not fully prepared to flee, and they definitely put your family at risk. That's assuming they don't actually outright kill you for your food. So it's just property, it's just stuff. Stuff can be replaced. That may not be the case in a true self-defense or true collapse scenario. In that case, your self-defense needs are heightened, if that makes sense. I think it's always justified to protect your property because it's part of your livelihood. It's part of protecting your life and the lives of your family members, to protect your property, but especially in a collapse scenario where you can't easily replace stuff, and stuff may be the key to your survival, especially like food and major, medical supplies and things like that. So if you're gonna bug in, be ready to defend yourself. If you live in the country, or you even live in the suburbs, but you have a decent sized land, make sure you've got your food supplies down. And same thing, even if you live in the suburbs, you got to be prepared to start gardening. You should be buying seeds now and storing them. Most seeds store pretty well as long as you keep them dry and in a cool, dark place in your home. So it can even just be a cupboard that's dry, and making sure that they're kind of in a Ziploc bag to keep them dry and all of that. You can also, if you make sure that they're sealed in that Ziploc bag, and you maybe put a little silica gel packet in that Ziploc bag to make sure that it's dry in there, you can store them in the fridge or even the freezer. You just don't want to keep taking them out overnight. Like, you don't want to keep taking them out to check on them. You want to leave them there, like, until it's time to bug out. But potentially you could even have some seeds in a bug out bag, if it's not being left out in the heat. So if you're leaving it in your car, you don't want to put seeds in there. But if you're keeping it in your home, or you're keeping it with you at all times, you could put some seeds in there. Because you want to be able to plant a garden in your backyard, your front yard, or if you live out in the country on your land, you want to be able to plant food. And you want to start that planting, ideally now. Ideally, if you can garden right now, garden. I've got a community garden. I can't take that with me. In a true bug out scenario, I'm leaving that all behind, and it's going to go wild, and hey, who knows what it'll produce for somebody else who's lucky enough to stumble across it. But if you live on land and you're going to bug in, then make sure that you are gardening now. And if you're not going to garden now, at least have the seeds on hand, and you're going to start that garden as soon as you realize this is it. This is the collapse. Again, if you can garden now, if you can start providing food for your family yourself now, that's better, because you're going to be more successful when it's really necessary. You're going to learn all the lessons the hard way, kind of thing. You're going to make all the mistakes now while you can still go to the grocery store. And then when it is a true collapse scenario, you're an experienced gardener. But you don't want to wait to plant that stuff until you run out of food, right? You run out of food and then you start planting, you're too late. So plant as early as you can, and know your growing season, know what grows in your area, that sort of thing. So I think that's everything that I wanted to share with you guys for this video. I will be talking on Saturday about, during my normal live stream, I will talk about the debates. And I'll answer any questions that you guys have. Oh, and I'm also going to go through my bug out bag. So I showed you a couple of things that are in my bug out bag. And actually these particular things were from my husband's bug out bag, because it was more easily, not so much more easily accessible, but his has less stuff in it. So I just went, these were quicker to grab. But I'm going to get my bug out bag out, which has more stuff, and I will show you that. So thank you guys for watching this video, especially if you really watched all the way to the end through all my commentary. I appreciate it, and I will see you guys on Saturday at 12:30 p.m. Central Time for Pro-Life, Pro-Liberty Live, talking about the debates, talking about my bug out bag, and whatever else comes up in the meantime. So thank you, and I'll see y'all soon.